I knew something was off the moment my mother smiled at me. Not the warm, familiar smile that used to greet me after school or during birthdays. This one was too polished. Lips pressed too tightly, the corners forced upward like someone trying to convince themselves they were happy to see me. My name is Natalie Griffin. I'm 30 years old, and I've been the emotional scaffolding of my family for as long as I can remember. I work as a senior data analyst at a firm downtown in Charlotte, North Carolina, live in a small, rented loft on the quiet side of town, and take my peace seriously. Or, at least, I used to. Until that dinner. It was a Sunday. Always was. Same spinach casserole, same chipped plates, same table where my father, Gerald, would ask about my work without listening, and my mother, Elaine, would make passing comments about how tired I looked, usually right after saying I was glowing. My sister Lindsay was already at the table when I arrived, hunched over her phone with her headphones half dangling, like she was too busy for the people who had been bailing her out since 2009. I sat down, already bracing. Elaine asked if I wanted to win, offering it like a peace treaty. Gerald gave me a distracted nod. Lindsay didn't look up. I knew this script. When my mother acted sweet and my father stayed quiet, something was coming, something they'd already decided. And sure enough, it came somewhere between the first forkful of chicken and the second pour of wine. Elaine set her fork down delicately, folded her hands over one another, and looked at me like I was 6 and about to be told why the family dog went to live on a farm. "Natalie," she said gently, "we've been talking, and Lindsay, well, she's been having a hard time again." I didn't look at Lindsay. I didn't need to. I could already feel the weight of the ask crawling across the table like steam off hot food. "We just think," Elaine continued, "it might help her to have some space to regroup, some structure, some peace." I tilted my head, sipping my wine. "And?" Elaine smiled, relieved I hadn't interrupted. "She's going to be moving in with you, just for a little while, until she gets back on her feet." There it was, dropped like a used napkin onto my lap, expectation coated in politeness. I turned slowly toward my sister. Lindsay didn't look up, but I caught the tiniest flicker of a smirk pulling at her lip, like she'd already won. Gerald shifted in his seat, avoiding eye contact. A man who'd asked me for something I later found out went to cover Lindsay's rent. I set my mind back. "Oh," I said. "Of course." Elaine blinked, as if unsure she heard right. "It was just Lindsay," I said. "I don't see why." Silence sat down at the table next to us. Elaine leaned back, like the tension came back. Lindsay finally None of them noticed the stillness inside me. None of them knew that I hadn't lived in that apartment for almost a month, that I'd moved out quietly, without fanfare or announcement, that I'd already transferred the lease to a quiet grad student named Drew, who paid on time and kept to himself. And I had no intention of letting Lindsay or anyone else turn that place, or my life, into a drop-off zone for their chaos again. I didn't arrive at that decision overnight. It took years. Years of quietly picking up the pieces while they pretended the floor wasn't covered in broken glass. When I was 22, Lindsay crashed my car and begged me not to tell Mom and Dad. I took the hit with my insurance. When I was 24, Gerald asked for a small loan to help with taxes. I wired it without hesitation. 2 months later, Lindsay posted vacation photos from Florida. When I was 27, Elaine called crying because Lindsay had made a mistake and needed a lawyer. I drained half my savings to keep the family's secret intact, but it was never enough. The gratitude lasted as long as the problem. Then came the next one. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being a daughter and started being a fix. So I moved, quietly, packed my life into 3 weekends, sold what I didn't need, and signed a new lease in a part of town no one knew I liked. A place where I could breathe. A place that wasn't theirs to invade. I kept the old place a secret, not out of spite, but preservation. You learn, mourn, when you're the reliable one, that people stop asking. They just assume that you'll say yes, that you'll absorb the blow, that you'll fix it. But I was done patching the boat while everyone else drilled holes. By the end of that dinner, Elaine was humming softly, wiping down the counters like the world had clicked back into place. Gerald was watching TV, feet up, drink in hand. Lindsay had disappeared into the bathroom. I excused myself early. No one noticed I left without hugging anyone goodbye. They thought, caved, that the old Natalie, the reliable Natalie, was still sitting there, nodding along like always. They didn't realize she was already gone. The texts started rolling in by Monday. First from Elaine. "We're thinking Saturday for the move. Just a mattress and a few boxes. Nothing too heavy." Then Gerald chimed in, short and blunt as always. "I'll be loading up Lindsay's stuff Friday night. She's excited. This will be good for her." No one asked if I'd be home. No one checked if I was okay with it. It wasn't even a conversation. It was logistics, like planning a package delivery. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. They weren't messaging me. They were messaging a version of me that no longer existed. The one who always said yes, always rearranged her life, always swallowed the bitter taste of resentment just to keep the peace. I wasn't her anymore. Each message confirmed what I'd known for years. My family didn't see me. They saw a resource, a fallback plan, a spare key to someone else's mess. I sat in my new apartment that Monday night, a modest loft on the east side of Charlotte, with large windows and soft, creaky floorboards that felt like home. I had no family pictures on the walls, only a framed print that said, "Stillness is a choice." I sipped chamomile tea as the messages kept pinging my phone. Tuesday, another text from Elaine. "Do you want us to clean before Lindsay gets there? I know she can be a little messy. We'll help with anything you need." That one made me laugh, dry and quiet. Help? They didn't help. They occupied. They assumed. They filled space and never returned it. I let it all roll in. No replies, no corrections, just an observation. By Wednesday, Elaine tried a different tone. "Lindsay says she wants to contribute. She's bringing her dishes and everything." Dishes. This is from the same sister who had left moldy takeout boxes under her bed in college, who once broke my dishwasher and blamed the manufacturer, who hadn't had a lease in her name since she was 23. Still, I let them talk. Let them move toward a destination that no longer exists. I didn't correct their course, because I knew where it would lead. On Saturday morning, I got up early, took my time, drove to the local Midtown farmers market, wandered past booths of strawberries, homemade soaps, and sourdough loaves. The sun felt warm on my skin, the kind of warmth that didn't ask anything in return. I didn't plan to buy anything. I just wanted to not be anywhere else. My phone buzzed again. I ignored it. 3 missed calls, then 4. The 5th rang through. I let it. "Natalie?" My mother's voice snapped, brittle and sharp. "There's a man here, at the condo. He says he lives here. Says you haven't lived here in weeks. What's going on?" I let a beat of silence stretch before I answered. A small inhale, calmly exhale. "Oh," I said. "That's right. I sold the place." "You what?" "I moved," I said. "Weeks ago. No one asked where I was living, so I didn't say." The line went quiet, and for the first time, I imagined the scene. My parents, Lindsay, and a truck full of boxes parked outside an apartment that no longer had my name on the lease. A stranger, probably Drew. Standing in the doorway, confused, holding a coffee mug, and looking like he'd just woken up to a sitcom-level misunderstanding. Elaine's voice returned tighter. "You lied to us. You said she could move in." "No," I replied. "I said, if it helps Lindsay, I don't see why not. I never said where." I heard the clatter of boxes in the background, Gerald's voice rising, Lindsay muttering something sharp. "Natalie," Elaine hissed. "What is this?" "This," I said evenly, "is me opting out." The silence was heavy. It had a shape to it, like a door slowly swinging close. "So what are we supposed to do now?" Lindsay's voice cut in, whiny, indignant. "Just figure it out on our own?" "Yes," I said softly. For a flicker of a second, I almost softened. Almost said I'd help find her a short-term rental or gave her the number of a friend with a spare room. But I didn't, because kindness isn't always about rescuing someone. Sometimes it's about letting them finally feel the ground under their own feet. By late afternoon, I was home again. Back in my clean, quiet apartment with the soft hum of the fridge and the muted city traffic far below. The knock came just before sunset. 3 short, stiff knocks. Urgent, polite, restrained. The kind of knock that belonged to someone holding back anger but still hoping to be invited in. I looked through the peephole. Elaine, Gerald, Lindsay, and behind them, the same boxes from earlier, now resting on the sidewalk like stranded luggage. I opened the door halfway. "You found me," I said quietly. Elaine's lipstick was smudged. Gerald's hands were clenched. Lindsay's face was flushed red, equal parts fury and fatigue. "We didn't think you'd be here," Elaine said. "It's my apartment," I answered. "But you said—" "I said if it helps Lindsay. I was at the old place. I don't live there anymore." "This is petty," Lindsay snapped. "You always think you're so superior, but this is just mean." I tilted my head slightly. "You packed up your life and drove across town to move into a place you never confirmed still existed. That's not cruelty. That's entitlement." Her voice cracked. "You're my sister." I nodded slowly. "And for years, I acted like that meant saving you. But maybe it just meant letting you grow up." Gerald stepped forward, his voice low and angry. "Enough! We're not leaving. You owe this to your sister." There it was. The debt I never signed for. The unspoken contract. I stepped back inside and picked up my phone. Elaine's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I dialed. 911, came the calm voice on the other end. "What's your emergency?" "My name is Natalie Griffin," I said, my voice level. "And I have 3 individuals outside my apartment who are refusing to leave. They're not on the lease. They weren't invited." The line behind me exploded. "You're calling the police on your family?" Elaine shrieked. I turned toward them, still holding the phone. "I asked you to leave. You didn't." The dispatcher took my address. I gave it. Lindsay's voice cracked with rage. "Do you know what people will think of you? Do you know what they'll say?" "Yes," I said. "They'll say I finally stopped opening my door." The patrol car arrived 10 minutes later. It pulled up slowly, deliberately, headlights dimmed but presence undeniable. A female officer stepped out, tall and even-voiced, hand resting near her belt, but not in a threatening way. Her uniform was crisp. Calm authority radiated off her like heat from sun-baked pavement. "Evening," she said, her gaze flicking from Gerald's clenched jaw to Elaine's forced smile. "We received a report about a possible trespassing situation?" I stepped forward, still holding the phone loosely in my hand. "That was me, Natalie Griffin. This is my residence, and these individuals were asked to leave." The officer's eyes swept the hallway, pausing on Lindsay, who looked like she might cry or throw something, or both. "Ma'am, sir," the officer said to my parents, "I'll have to ask you to vacate the premises. You don't have permission to be here, and you're not on the lease." Gerald stepped forward, chest puffed. "This is our daughter," he said, as if blood canceled boundaries. "This is a family matter." "And it's happening on private property," the officer replied evenly, "which you're not allowed to occupy without the tenant's consent." Elaine's lips parted, the words forming but not quite finding their way out. I could see it in her eyes, the disbelief, that I'd followed through, that I hadn't broken the way I always did. Lindsay looked directly at me then. Her voice shook. "You're going to regret this, Natalie. You're making a scene." "No," I said. "I've lived in a scene my entire life. This is the first moment of clarity I've had in years." The officer raised her brow, waiting. Gerald muttered a curse. Elaine picked up a small cardboard box with Lindsay's name scribbled on the side. Lindsay stood frozen, her cheeks red, her fists balled. But eventually they all turned, not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. They walked past the officer, down the hallway, back toward the elevator, like exiles who didn't understand their exile was self-imposed. When the door shut behind them, the officer turned to me. "Are you okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, I just needed to mean it this time." And then I left. I closed the door quietly. And for a while, I just stood there, leaning against it, not crying, not shaking, just breathing. For the first time in years, I wasn't racing. I wasn't anticipating the next task. I just existed. That night, I made my simple I lit a candle, not for ambiance, but because the soft flicker steadied me. My phone buzzed relentlessly on the counter. 12 missed calls. 5 from Elaine. 2 from Gerald. The rest of the numbers I didn't recognize. Probably cousins or family friends who'd already been looped in. I didn't answer. Instead, I scrolled. And there it was. Elaine's Facebook post. Public. 3 paragraphs laced with heartbreak emojis and a vintage photo of Lindsay as a toddler in a blue jumper. "We raised both our daughters to love and protect each other," it began. "But some lessons don't stick. It breaks our hearts to see Lindsay, kind and vulnerable, cast aside by someone who should have been her protector. Natalie, successful, well-off but cold, has shut the door on her own family. We are devastated. Please pray for us." The comments came fast. Dozens of people I barely remembered, childhood neighbors, church ladies, distant relatives I hadn't spoken to since high school, leapt in to label me selfish, spoiled, heartless. Shame on her. Money changes people. Lindsay always had such a sweet soul. None of them knew the hours I'd spent helping pay off Lindsay's credit card debt at 21. Or the time she bounced a rent check and used my bank info to transfer funds without asking. Or when she took my car without permission and got a parking ticket in another state. None of them saw the years I went without vacations, celebrations, or stability, because someone in my family always needed something, usually something I had worked hard to earn. And suddenly, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was done. So I posted back. Not a rant, not a dragged-out argument, just a thread of screenshots. A 2015 bank transfer receipt for $2,000 to my parents' e-mortgage account. My name is a co-signer on Lindsay's 2016 car loan, followed by the repossession notice. A scanned invoice from a DUI attorney listing my card as the payer. A 2000 text from Lindsay. You're just a robot with a job. God forbid you help your sister for a month. A photo of the condo sale agreement, signed and finalized. I ended the thread with one simple sentence. I didn't abandon my family. I just stopped volunteering for emotional debt. Then I turned my phone face down and walked away. I didn't do it for vindication. I didn't even care if they read it. I did it for closure. That night, I poured myself another cup of tea, not out of habit, but out of choice. I turned off the overhead lights, let the city glow through my window. My apartment was clean, uncluttered. A reflection of a life I'd started carving on my terms. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything I had finally made space for, myself. By morning, the text had turned from confused to cruel. Your mom is devastated. Linda Say is sleeping in her car. Is that what you wanted? I hope success keeps you warm at night. Some were unsigned. Others came from cousins who hadn't said my name aloud in a decade. Each one read like a cold echo from a family that had spent years turning warmth into leverage. I read them once, then deleted them all. At lunch, my coworker Talia, who sat across from me at the firm, leaned in gently. Hey, she said. Your name's Linda, trending in our extended circle. Your mom's post is getting shared. I gave her a small nod. Yeah, I figured. Talia's eyes were kind but cautious. You okay? I think so, I said. I mean, I feel a little like a monster right now, but I also feel light. She hesitated, then said quietly, There's a difference between cruelty and choosing peace. I nodded. I just wished they could see that. But they couldn't, because in my family, boundaries had always been interpreted as rejection. Silence was ungratefulness. Success was selfishness, unless it was shared. And I'd spent most of my life mistaking compliance for kindness. The calls didn't stop. Gerald left a voicemail that started with, I hope you're proud of yourself, and ended with, don't bother showing up for Thanksgiving. I wasn't planning to anyway. Elaine left a longer one, tearful, guilt-laced, a performance I knew by heart. I don't know who you've become, Natalie. You used to be so sweet. You used to care. Do you remember when Lindsay had the flu in college and you slept on the floor of her dorm room? What happened to that girl? I remembered her. She cried silently while driving Lindsay to the ER. She skipped work to stay bedside. She failed a class that semester and told no one. She was the same girl who now, 10 years later, had learned that loving someone doesn't mean erasing yourself for them. Elaine's voice cracked. Family is forever, she whispered. But even forever has terms. I blocked both their numbers, not out of cruelty, not out of revenge, but because I'd realized something. Not every door deserves to be knocked on forever. That night, as I washed dishes in my quiet apartment, I looked out over the city lights. I could see people walking on the sidewalks below. Couples, a woman with a golden retriever, 2 kids on scooters. Life went on. Without permission, without apology. And I wasn't missing from it. I was finally in it. A few days later, I bumped into my old landlord from the condo, Mrs. Holloway, at the grocery store. She was browsing avocados, her cart half full of kale and cereal. Miss Griffin! She smiled genuinely. I didn't get to say goodbye. Heard you moved. I did, I said, returning the smile. New place, less space, more peace. She nodded knowingly. Good for you. That old place. Your visitors were always so loud. I blinked. You heard them? Oh, honey, everyone did. I saw your sister on the balcony once, screaming into a phone. Thought it was a soap opera. We both laughed gently. Some people think you're cold, she said, not unkindly. But I think you're just finished. I didn't reply. I just touched her arm, smiled again, and walked away. Back at home, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a nap. No noise, no guilt, no one is banging on or asking for help. Just me, a blanket, and an afternoon without expectation. When I woke, the sun had begun to set. I lit a candle, brewed tea, and walked onto the balcony. The air was crisp, not biting, just enough to remind me I was alive. From 2 floors below, a neighbor I barely knew waved at me. I waved back. It was simple, uncomplicated, and somehow more sincere than most of the I love you I'd heard from my family in years. Later, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The messages on my Facebook post had shifted. At first, silence, then a few cautious hearts, then one long comment from Aunt Colleen, whom I hadn't seen since my high school graduation. Natalie, I just read your post. I had no idea. You've always been the strong one, and I guess we never thought to ask how you were doing. I'm sorry for being one of the people who assumed. I hope you're okay now. I reread that message a dozen times, then replied simply, Thank you. Because sometimes healing doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in a single sentence, a pause where judgment used to be. And that night, I slept, deep, dreamless, whole. It's strange, the first morning you wake up and realize no one expects anything from you. Not an apology, not a wire transfer, not a solution you didn't break and weren't invited to fix, just space. I woke up that morning with sunlight peeking through my curtains, the kind of warm, soft light that feels like permission. I sat up slowly, stretched, and reached for my tea instead of my phone. No unread messages, no missed calls, no voicemail guilt trips clinging to the edges of my consciousness. Just the hum of the fridge, the old wood floors beneath my socks, the peace of not being needed for someone else's convenience. I'd forgotten how good it felt to be unimportant, to others, that is, because for once, I mattered to me. Later that afternoon, I received one last email. It came from Lindsay's address. The subject line was blank. The body of the message was short. You didn't have to humiliate us like that. You win. I hope it makes you feel powerful. I stared at the words for a moment. Not with anger, not even with sadness. Just with the kind of quiet pity reserved for someone still clinging to a version of the story where they're the victim of boundaries they were never taught to respect. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my photos folder, scrolled past years of family birthdays, photos where I was always behind the camera, always holding someone else's plate, cutting someone else's cake, the background figure, the helper. And then I found one from last week, taken from my balcony, just me, a cup of tea, hair down, no makeup, city lights behind me. I looked, still. I saved that one as my phone wallpaper. That evening, I walked to the little diner down the street, the one I'd passed 100 times but never gone into because I'd always been too busy. Helping, driving, fixing. I slid into a booth by the window, ordered pancakes at 6 p.m. just because I could. The waitress, a college student named Emily, smiled and said, Rough day or celebration? Neither, I said. Just quiet. She nodded like she understood, and for once, someone did. A week passed, then 2. The Facebook post faded into the scroll of other people's weddings, vacations, and holiday outfits. Elaine deleted it quietly, without acknowledgement. I knew she would. That kind of shame doesn't ask permission. It sneaks away when the audience stops clapping. I didn't hear from Gerald again. Not a word, not a breath. Lindsay posted something vague and dramatic on Instagram, a selfie with the caption, "Some people only love you when you're useful." It got a few dozen likes. No one tagged me. Good. I didn't need to be named to be free. And freedom, as it turns out, isn't loud. It doesn't show up in neon signs or parades. It looks like chamomile tea and unread messages. It feels like walking into your apartment and not holding your breath. It sounds like the hum of stillness, not silence, but peace. I didn't regret calling the police. Not for a moment. Because the real betrayal hadn't happened on my doorstep that night. It had happened slowly over years of unspoken demands and obligations repackaged as love. And that's the hardest kind of hurt to name. The kind where people call it family and expect you to bleed for it. But I finally understood something. Love doesn't keep score. But it doesn't ignore patterns either. And if someone only calls it love when you're giving, not when you say enough, then it's not love. It's control. In my quiet apartment, I found a different kind of strength. Not the strength to endure, but the strength to walk away. To rewrite the script. To say, this is where I end and you begin. And some doors, they need to stay closed. For good. In a world where family is often used as currency, Natalie Griffin spent her life paying debts she never owed. From co-signing loans to covering legal fees, Natalie was always the who held the net, until she realized she was falling too. The moment her parents tried to hand over her apartment to her chaotic older sister Lindsay without asking, Natalie didn't scream. She didn't argue. She smiled and let the trap close on its own. What they didn't know was that she no longer lived there. And the place they planned to invade? It now belonged to a stranger. When the truth unraveled, it wasn't rage that followed. It was resistance. Quiet, firm, undeniable. Natalie didn't plead or justify. She called the police. She drew a line. And when the smear campaign began, complete with public Facebook posts and whispered accusations, she responded not with vengeance, but with receipts. Her final act wasn't dramatic. It was decisive. She turned off her phone. She made tea. She waved to a neighbor. In those small moments, she reclaimed her name from the mouths of those who had twisted it. This isn't a revenge story. It's a story about relief. About learning that love isn't an obligation. It's a choice. And when love demands the erasure of self, walking away becomes the only act of love left. For yourself. So if you've ever been called cold for saying no, if you've ever been guilted for setting limits, this story is for you. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is not open the door.